Welcome back to the How To Home podcast. My name is Aaron Massey, and joining me as always is Tracy Pendergast.
Hello.
It's just the two of us today.
I know, it feels so right.
The reason why it's just the two of us today is we are talking about surviving a remodel. Both of us have lived in a home that's under construction or currently under construction in both our cases.
Yep.
And it can be an extremely stressful time, both financially and stressful on your family and your relationship and everything. So we're going to talk about our experiences and give some tips as far as how to make it go as smoothly as possible in kind of an unconventional time.
Right. And then also, I think it's important to talk about the mistakes we think we've made and will not make again, because obviously we don't have the answers because we've always done it the right way, right?
Yep. And before we dive in, we would love to hear your remodel horror stories as well. If you want to call in or hit us up via social media, our number is 978-709-1040. Call in, tell us your remodel horror stories. Hit us up on social media as well, at howtohome_guide on Instagram. And also make sure that you're following us on our email list so you don't miss out on another episode.
Also, on a positive note, I'd love to hear survival tips from other people.
For
like,
sure.
How did they make it fun? What kind of meals did you eat when you didn't have your kitchen?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's a lot of great tips out there too from our audience. So hit us up with those.
People can be extremely resourceful when it comes to that type of thing.
Absolutely.
So I would love to hear what people do out there. I know a friend of mine, they lived out of like a Yeti cooler for a couple of weeks while their kitchen was out of commission. And some people are just like, pizza every night. We're getting pizza. Order in. Also, we want to thank our founding partner of the show, Filter By, for making this episode possible. Filter By is, of course, an HVAC filter provider. They ship direct to consumer under a subscription model. You can sign up. You can set your delivery however often you want.
Right, and you save 5% when you subscribe.
That's
so it's
right.
a great option.
I have mine set to deliver every 3 months, but, depending on your climate, you may want to change that or whatever. But set whatever you want on any interval or frequency that you want, and they ship directly to you within 24 hours.
Great company.
So let's talk about surviving a remodel.
Yep.
I know it can be extremely stressful. I've lived in it. You've lived in it. You're going through it. And there's a lot of things that go into a remodel. And I think you don't really understand how much goes into it and how much you put yourself into it until you're in it.
Right.
What are some of your tips, or what can you suggest that you're currently going through that maybe the audience might learn something from?
The number one thing before you swing a hammer or do anything is setting a realistic expectation. What am I okay with? What am I not okay with? Who is going to handle these responsibilities? How much time are we willing to invest in this process? How much money are we willing to invest in this process? One thing my husband and I talked about before we started, and I feel it's really, really helped us, is we said, we are not going to complain. We are blessed to be able to be doing this. We know it's going to be a complete hot mess, and we're just going to make the most out of it. We've had days that have been really hard, but I think it's more taking a breath and saying, thank you so much for putting me in this position to learn. Thank you for putting me in this position to have the home that I want, and move on.
There's the scenario where, you're getting all this work done. You're bringing in a bunch of contractors, and you have all these strangers in your house working day in, day out from sun up to sundown. And you just, you're living there during this whole process. And then there's the other scenario, which is more like what I'm used to, which is you're working or doing whatever you're doing through the day, and then you come home and you're doing the work,
Right.
And so it's a lot to tackle if you're from a DIY perspective, because you got to keep yourself motivated for that amount of time to get the job done.
Right.
And you're sacrificing a lot in that time as well. You're spending hours on the nights and weekends to really kind of tackle those projects on your own, and there's a lot of opportunity cost there that you're giving up.
Absolutely.
But you're living in this place that's under construction as well, which can be hard. There's days where you're not going to feel like doing it. There's going to be days where you just won't do it just because you're just like, I just can't do it today. But it prolongs the process. It drags it out. So finding that motivation and finding ways to continue from a DIY perspective is certainly a key.
So we did DIY on our last house. We basically did everything ourselves. and we didn't have kids then. So it really wasn't as stressful. I mean, obviously there was a sense of like, how long is this going to last? Let's like get this thing done. But there was no one depending on us for a safe space. Obviously, I have children that need to eat, that need to nap, that need clean clothes for school. I had to like put a little note in my son's bucket the other day that said, please don't judge me. He was wearing like rolled up pants that had like chalk on them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so embarrassing. And the teacher wrote a note back saying, been there, done that, like no worries. But it's definitely a different set of hurdles when you have young children and you have routine.
I know it slowed me down substantially, you know, since my son came around. Just, yeah, I mean, even when you're doing DIY projects around the house and stuff, you're doing things in between naps. You're more conscious of, you know, what kind of noise you're making, how often you're doing it. You can't be, you know, shaking the walls of the house down trying to do stuff.
There are no naps at our house anymore.
Yeah, well. So beyond setting realistic expectations, I think we've had a lot of designers on the show, right? And even if you don't work with a designer, the idea is that you have to have an overall vision for what your project is going to be. Because if you're shifting things as you're going, it's making the project take longer. Two, it's, you know, you're going to kind of have this hodgepodge of things that you're figuring it out on the fly, and it's going to make it more expensive.
Right.
You know, so having that cohesive vision from the start before you even, you know, break down a wall or whatever is going to be paramount to making sure that you can get through the remodel both in a timely manner and in the budget constraints that you want. Because every time you change something, whether you have a contractor doing it or you're doing it yourself, you're going to pay more.
Right.
Because you're buying more materials, you're returning stuff, you're losing money on whatever, and you're losing the time.
I think when you have a vision of what you want your entire home to be, it also allows you to jump around with the level of money that you want to spend and which projects you can do. So if I know we want our entire house to be like a mixture of natural woods and like white cabinetry and this and that, then it allows me to say, okay, well, let's do all the flooring at once in one big sweep. Then let's go through and have our cabinet guy not only hit on our kitchen, but also like hit on the entertainment center and kind of like group things in a way that makes sense instead of feeling like you have to do one whole space at the same time, which I think is a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
Being on the same page with your partner, you know, super important from a vision perspective. And I think the easiest way to do that, you know, nowadays, specifically either Instagram or Pinterest or whatever, you know, make those boards, even if they're not public, you don't have to share them. You can make private boards on Pinterest and share them with your spouse and be like, okay, I love this, I love this, I love this, I love this. And then you can start piecing things and pulling things from different places, start compiling an overall vision to kind of get the place together, get it all cohesive so that you know what, and then you can start sourcing it, right? It's, okay, well, these cabinets they look very similar. We can get those at, you know, wherever, and then this we can get from here, and you can start sourcing it, and then you can get a realistic sense of budget, you know, because like I said, if you're like, oh, I really want to remodel this place, and you just start into it, you're going to end up opening up the walls, and you're not going to have that finish because you're like, oh, I don't have time to pick out this. I don't have time to pick out that. I don't have, you know.
Right.
So it's like not figuring it out on the fly. Knowing it on the front end so that you can kind of target and source things helps you create a realistic budget for the room or space that you're trying to figure out.
Right. I think it also gives you a really strong sense of what you can DIY and what you need to hire out for. So we have cabinetry being done in our kitchen, and our laundry room attaches to our kitchen. And originally we were going to have the same guy do the shelving in our laundry room. And then it's like, dude, that's like 2 prefab cabinets. We can totally hang ourselves afterwards. We can totally frame that out. We can put a countertop on top of the washer and dryer. So I think it helps prioritize as well where you're going to spend the money and where you can pick up these small projects on your own.
So in your space, you've got kitchen, dining room, living room, laundry room, all at once, right?
Yes.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge amount of space. So anywhere, obviously the budget constraint thing in a project like that, is huge to try and keep
Right.
under budget. Because I think one thing that maybe people don't realize is that every remodel that I've ever been a part of and that I know of has gone over budget.
Over budget, over time.
And it's not necessarily that the work isn't being done. It's that things come up along the way, and it's like, okay, since the wall's open, do you want to do this?
Right.
And it's an addition. You're adding things like, oh well, it's open. Yeah, I should do that. I'm running that extra cable. I'm running those extra lights. I'm doing this. I'm doing that, and it's all little things.
Right. And that comes back to the point of if you have a very strong vision for the entire house, when those things come up, and it's, do you want to add this to this while it's open? You can think ahead because you already know kind of how you want everything to go and make a super educated, smart decision on those. And they are upgrades.
They're add-ons, they're upgrades and stuff, but it comes up. I mean, it's come up in everything that I've done. It's kind of one of those things, even DIY, it's like you get into it and you go, man, you know what? I should do this while I'm here,
Right.
while I'm in it, because I'm going to have to come back and do it later otherwise, or I'm going to add this later. I'm going to do this. And it's less work. It's to do it then, but it's more money,
Right.
so it adds a cost. And that's why when I talk to friends of mine that reach out to me, they're like, how much do you think it would cost to, remodel this bathroom or do whatever? Obviously it varies, but it's like whatever fixtures, and once you kind of have a design sense, I always say add 15%.
Right.
Because it's just going to happen.
Right. And if you're working with a contractor, they'll give you, so the way our contractor priced it out is he gives us this much budget for paint. He gives us this much budget for countertops. So that's just based on what he thinks we'll probably pick and the space we'll probably paint.
I know some other contractors and stuff that do like a low and a high. Like on the low side, here's kind of what you think. And then on a high side, this is kind of what you think. And it's depending on, what types of finishes, what types of, hardware and things that you're picking. Because, there's a huge gap there.
Exactly.
Whether you're picking top of the line faucets and fixtures from, X store, or you're going to Home Depot and picking up, your basic Kohler ones.
Right.
There's a wide range in pricing.
Yeah, and there are opportunities to save money along the way
For
too.
sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But everybody's goal is to spend the least amount of money and get the most bang for their buck, right? Every homeowner has the exact same goal in mind. But having that budget in place, setting the realistic expectations, and having the clear vision, I think are, the basis to kind of get what you want out of this remodel without being overly stressed from it.
Absolutely.
You have to know those things going into it, because yes, all these things are going to add up and you're going to encounter them along the way. And if you don't have all this stuff kind of set on the front end, it's going to add such a level of stress that's going to carry over into your day-to-day life that's going to drive you nuts.
Right.
And you're going to carry that to work. You're going to carry that wherever you go.
Yeah.
And it is a very stressful time in your life to have and live in a remodel at the same time.
Yeah, and certainly when you have young kids, you don't want them to associate. It's already a lot for them and an adjustment for them. So you don't want to associate any work going on in the house with their parents being stressed or arguing or just bad energy. So it's working really hard to communicate all of those things at the front end for sure.
Well, communication certainly is a huge component with your spouse as well. You've got to know what you're willing to give and take, what things are really important to me from the design aspect, the budget aspect, all that type of stuff, what I really want out of it. And then you got to take into account what they really want out of it too.
Right.
It's a shared space. You're living there, you're raising your family in it and all that stuff, but you got to know it's compromise, right? Just like everything else we've talked about, it's give and take of what I want versus what you want, figuring out that middle ground, that compromise, what's important,
Right.
and then going from there.
And that's where things become really emotional, in my opinion, is there's two people living in the house, so it belongs to both of you. You're both contributing. If you're not contributing financially, you're still contributing. You're home with the kids or overseeing the work or whatever it is. And I think everyone just wants to be heard, but not everyone can have what they want, right? There's only one sink, there's only one faucet, there's only one refrigerator. So I think it's standing firm on the things that really mean a lot to you, but also knowing when you need to just back out and let things go, which is not easy.
Well, I think taking a step back and just realizing it's like, okay, you're going through a remodel. You're living a very privileged life if you're even getting to that point where you're able to make a space the way you want it. You know, if you have the budget to do it. If you have these things are all they're minuscule in the grand scheme of things. You know, but yeah, they are important. You want your home to be the place where you know, raise your family and you make your memories and you all this, you know, so there's a reason why people go through a remodel in the first place.
Right.
But when you just take a step back and if things get too stressful for you, you just take a step back and you look and you say, look, we're in a very privileged situation to be able to even do this, you know, to make our dream home and all this stuff. And so it's not that big of a deal. And maybe, you know, maybe that will allow you to be like, okay, I'm willing to let go of that or, you know, this item or that. I don't really need it. You're right. It's not a, you know, it's not a necessity. It's just a want.
I think too that social media can really cause us to be very hard on ourselves and set expectations kind of unrealistically high. You know, not all of us can have a showroom for a house.
Right.
Not all of us do a big reveal at the end of our project. Like, homes are created over time and they evolve. And I think just putting the expectation on yourself that everything needs to look a certain way is unfair. I think that one thing that's really helped me, and I have to remind myself all the time, is there is no right or wrong in design, right? We just have like very strong opinions on what we like.
It's subjective.
So, yeah. And we can, my husband and I feel, make very good arguments to our points, but, you know, no one's right or wrong. And at the end of the day, someone just has to, it's give and take, and you win some, you lose some.
I'm a function person, right? So it's like, does the toilet flush? Does the sink work? Does it, you know, it's like, yeah, great, perfect. And then about the social media aspect of things, yeah, it's the same. It's the TV world, it's the social media world. You're constantly being barraged with what people want you to see. Not the other, you don't see the other stuff. You don't see the mess and the dirt and the stuff that goes into it unless you're following, you know, contractors and other accounts like that show you the real work, you know. Well,
you're showcasing your home on social media and your work.
And it's not pretty a lot of the time.
But do you feel pressure for it to look a certain way because you know people are watching? Like, are you affected by opinions?
I would probably be lying if I said I wasn't. But I think I do a fairly good job of being able to let it go. You know, like, yeah, I want to put the best product out there, but from my perspective and from what it is that I do, everything is a learning experience. You know, I am not an expert in any of these fields. And I've said that on my videos many times. And I understand that, you know, people look to me as an expert. And I try to present the best knowledge and information and execute the project as best as I possibly can, given the current knowledge that I have. But to me, that's what DIY is all about. It's about using the tools and the knowledge that you currently have to do the best job that you possibly can, given those constraints.
Right.
And with each process, and we talked about it previously on a previous episode, you make mistakes. And in those mistakes, you learn, and you won't do the same thing again.
Right.
And so that learning process is growth, right? There's no perfect formula. You don't just plug and play, you know? And sometimes you spend more money DIYing than just hiring somebody. Sometimes you save money. But you don't really know, you know, unless you get into it.
So I think one of the biggest things I've learned from all of our guests is just to take your time. And I think that is part of what goes into when you're having these debates with your spouse. If there's decorative stuff that both people don't like, keep looking. You know, during this process, we've had people come in with samples and they're like, okay, these are the samples. Which one do you want? And it's like, well, can I live with it for a couple days? Can you leave it here? Can I see it in different lights? Because I feel overwhelmed and I don't want to point at something in this moment and not really think it through. I think it's okay to tell to say you're not ready. You need time to like live with stuff. If you're going to do something that involves like flooring, countertops, finishes, I would highly recommend looking at this stuff in advance and kind of coming to decisions on what you like, because it's very easy to get worn down. And by the end of the process, you just point and you're like, dude,
you're settling.
Just do that. I don't even care. Like, right. And it might not be the best. It might just be the best out of the 8 things you were presented in that moment. So continue to do your own research and just find things that everyone likes, you know?
What sort of things have popped up in your experience going through this now? Like, obviously you had an idea of what this was going to be like when you started it. What has popped up along the way that has been a hurdle that you didn't expect, or what has become harder?
So my biggest concern was the children, the kids being uncomfortable. The kids have been the easiest part. Kids are adaptable. Kids are like our teachers. They teach me every day how I should be dealing with situations. Like they think this is an adventure. You know, they're riding their bikes in the house. They're watching cool equipment come in and out. And I'm trying to be more like them. Something I didn't anticipate is just, so like as you're tearing your whole house apart, there's just a lot of big feelings, like not to get like deep, but my husband and I, it hasn't even been arguments, but really big discussions over like feeling heard, feeling like we both have a say, like feeling appreciated, you know. There's financial aspects. There's someone throwing more money in. There's someone who's in charge of babysitting all the workers all day and dealing with that stress. There's someone that's carrying the emotional weight of like any anxieties the children might feel, which, you know, I definitely take that on. So I think it's just us both needing to be heard, and it comes out during really weird discussions, like over a microwave or over like a counter. And all of a sudden it's a discussion about like, well, I don't think you know how I feel, you know? And I think that's normal when you're pulling apart your life essentially from the ground up. And it's been a good experience and a learning experience, but I just have told everyone that like, if you don't have a strong relationship and good communication, you just cannot go into this in like a broken state, because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
All your stuff that you do on a daily basis is going to get harder.
Yeah.
Laundry's harder, you know, cooking's harder. And all the stuff that you don't like to do on a daily basis. Well, I mean, a lot of people like different things, but you know, I don't like to spend a ton of time in the kitchen, but if it's like, okay, now kitchen becomes even harder. You know, I'm cooking, you know, microwave meals every single day, or I'm eating this, or I'm doing that.
The eating is hard. The food is very hard. If it were just the adults, it wouldn't be hard. I have a very deep concern for the food I put in my kids' bodies. So like that has definitely been an issue. A positive thing I've learned from this that has been a huge experience is like how little stuff we need.
Oh, yeah.
Like our kids don't need special cups. Our kids don't need special forks or special plates. They don't need like all this stuff. Like they just want to be outside. Paper plates are fine. Paper cuts are cool. Like they think plastic silverware is like the coolest thing ever, that they get to use that. And also with commitments, like it makes you realize how much extra you're doing in your life, and you have to cut those things out, like your commitments. And I think it just teaches you to simplify. It's been a great lesson.
And declutter for sure. Like, I mean, when you have to move stuff around a bunch because you're working room to room or you're doing this and that, there's only so many times where you'll move something and you go, why do I even have this anymore? I do not need it. And you just, you know, get rid of it or donate it or do whatever. But to your point about kids not needing anything, yeah, I can speak to that, because my son's favorite thing is a diaper box with a belt attached to it that I tow him around the house with.
Yep.
I mean, that's it. That's all he needs, and he would be happy like all day. And instead, he's got 100 toys. So yeah, I mean, it is. I feel like we project these things onto. You know, you're into it. You get stressed out about things that don't need to be stressed out about. You can just kind of focus on, and I think you're looking at it from a financial thing. You're like, am I going to get this money back? Am I going to do this? Am I going to get this? And it's easy to overthink. It's easy to really just kind of ruminate on these things that they don't really matter in the long run.
Right.
But, you want to do it right. So obviously people carry a lot of weight with those things. But, I think a lot of the tips that we're talking about, having a clear vision, making sure you set a realistic expectation, budget, all that type of stuff. Like, these are great things to think about before you get started. Don't do all this stuff once you're into it. I mean, if you're into it already and you're listening to this and you're just trying to push through, just push through. That's the only tip we can give you.
Right.
Try not to sacrifice everything and just end up with something you're not going to be happy with at the end. Do it the way that you want to. Yes, you might have to pay a little bit more money than you were comfortable with or whatever. You can get that back. You'll figure it out. But have these things in mind on the front end before you get started, and it's going to save you so much stress, so many sleepless nights. You're going to be able to just kind of tackle it and know what you're getting. And I think that part of it, I don't like hiring people, a lot, because I can do a lot of the work myself, and I can manage the job and do things. But there is a lot to be said about people taking on either the design aspect or the managing of the contractors,
the project
and the
management,
project, all that stuff. There is a lot of work involved in there. That's a reason why people have these jobs. They're skilled trades for a reason. And if you're trying to tackle that or take that on as a homeowner who doesn't have any knowledge of doing that or what's involved or whatever, and you just think you're just going to, throw yourself into it, it's going to stress you out.
Right. I have to say, one of the coolest parts of watching the remodel has been seeing all the different tradesmen come in and how they communicate and work with each other.
It's awesome, isn't it?
It's so cool. Yeah. It's such a cool, they work together as such a great team and support each other and communicate well. And it's been really cool to watch. And I think it's taught me a lot about project management when because we'll do the bathrooms by ourselves now. We'll everything else pretty much we'll do ourselves with the exception of new carpeting in the kids' rooms. But it's just I like watching the workflow. It's pretty amazing to see.
I get this sometimes via social media and stuff. People think that I'm anti-trades because I do the stuff myself and I don't hire people and whatever. And that couldn't be any farther from the truth. In fact, I appreciate what these guys do so much.
Right.
A lot of this stuff, I'm just I couldn't imagine myself doing it on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, yeah.
It's just the amount of work that's involved and the stuff that they do. I have a profound appreciation for it. Doesn't mean I want to do it every day. But I do like it, and I like having the knowledge to do it myself. And so a lot of that type of stuff, when I consider myself DIY, for example, is I love what these guys are doing. I want to be able to do it. And I really respect the professionalism that they can do it. So what you're talking about, when they come in and they're communicating and doing this work, and I got to do this, but you got to do that, and we're kind of coexisting. It's awesome to see these guys work together like that.
Yeah, and my husband popped in the other day while one of the guys was doing drywall, and they had this huge long discussion about so you mix a little bit of the quick set with a little bit of this, and this is how he's learning all of these different
yeah, it takes one day
skills.
of spending. I almost want to just spend a day with each. It's because it's awesome to see that type of stuff and how these guys work. But that doesn't mean I'm anti-trade just because I don't want to spend the money or whatever.
Right.
It's because I want to genuinely learn it.
And you have
the only way
time.
to learn. Yeah, and the only way that I'm going to learn is by doing.
Yep.
So that's the reason why I do what it is. I do what I do. But
absolutely.
We're talking about budget, and we touched on it a little bit, but things have a tendency to snowball. We talked about how things can you're doing this, then all of a sudden now you've got this, now you've got this. Well, things can easily snowball out of control. Specifically, if you have a really tight budget in mind in the first place. You have to nip that in the bud somewhere.
Right.
You have to take a look at it and be okay, we just can't. We just can't do that right now because it'll snowball, it'll get out of control, and you're going to be spending exponentially more money than you wanted to. So I don't know how to say where you draw the line, but keep in mind that you should have a line somewhere.
Absolutely. And So we've shifted money around and we've pulled things that we were initially going to do and then decided we'll do it on the next round. So we were initially not going to add an island, and then we were going to possibly do it down the line. We weren't really sure. Then we realized that because of electrical and the fact that we were doing hardwood flooring, it could essentially be drilled right into the flooring, that we should probably do it. So we pulled the cabinets out of the laundry room, and we're not doing that. There's just certain things where my husband has jumped in a truck and went and got wood and like had stuff framed out before the guys showed up, just to save money. And I think there will be things that come up, but then you have to decide.
Prioritize.
What things, yeah, and you just don't have to do everything at once. So do the things that make sense with the walls open up, or, in the spot that you're in, get everything done that you can and worry about the decorative finishing stuff later, The bar stools at the bar can wait. We probably won't have any for like a long time. We're not going to have a new dining room table and chairs for a long time, which, it sucks when you have a new space. You want it to look finished.
Well, you mentioned it, like there's no reveal day.
No.
You don't have, nobody's pulling this curtain back and all of a sudden it's a reveal. It's like, oh, look at this.
Right.
It takes time. It takes time to build out and have kind of a finished space.
And
even when it's finished, it's not finished.
Yeah,
because you're going to keep adding stuff to it. There's going to be elements that are added later on. You're going to tweak it. On social media and television, you see a lot of finished spaces, but they're not lived in. It's like, okay, it's done.
Either that or the people have enough money to do it all at once. And that's amazing. If you have the money to do it all at once, that's great. Most people do not. Like, we do things in chunks. So we do big projects at a time, but then there will be a recoup period now where we have to save up money again before we do this again. And it's going to be a long time. So I just don't think it's realistic.
There's a reason why, people live in houses for 25 years and it's like, oh, we've done this, and this, and this. Yeah, well, you've done it over 25 years,
Right.
It takes time to get stuff done. If you want to be in the house long term, that's an investment well spent, If you're trying to flip it or you only be in there for a short amount of time, then obviously you want to get the work turned around and sold. But that's a different thing. Dealing with the stress, of a remodel, I certainly can't say that it doesn't exist. There's a lot of stress on the person doing the work. There's a lot of stress on the person or people who are just living in the house and maybe they're not doing the work. It's a lot. It is a lot to manage, and I don't want to sugarcoat it and say that it isn't. It is what it is. But it's your space at the end of the day, and you're going to have it the way that you want it, whether you pay to have somebody else do it or you do it yourself. So it's worth it. And if you have to make some sacrifices along the way, so what?
Right. And one thing I would highly recommend before you choose when you're going to do your remodel is actually sit down and look at the calendar. And if they tell you it's going to be 4 months, first of all, plan on 5, but look at the calendar, look at birthdays, look at holidays, look at work commitments, and figure out, is this going to be a doable time? There were things I did not think about. Like, I run an at-home business that is packaging. I package things and ship them. I did this remodel during Christmas. So I was like trying to package things in a little room, like hoping my stuff wasn't covered in dust. I did not even think about that. I would have totally done it again, but they're just things that I didn't consider. So I would highly recommend looking at the calendar and kind of realizing that those are going to be some difficult months.
And maybe if you're doing I know, for example, my brother, like he wanted to tackle a DIY bathroom remodel in his home. He has 2 kids, 2 young kids, and he smartly, I think, had his wife and my niece and nephew go stay at her mother's place for a couple weekends, and that way he could just work uninterrupted, uninterrupted for a couple weekends. And he would put in long days during that time. If you're doing a DIY tackle or a tile job or bathroom remodel or whatever, those are long days, And so he would put in these long days and he wouldn't have to worry about that added stress. He had the help, he had the support, and was able to do that. And I think that was really smart of him, And that's something to consider, if you're going to do it yourself, that's a great approach to take, I think. And I would never even thought about that, but
Right.
that was a great idea on his part.
You know what I don't recommend is deciding 2 weeks before you have company or Christmas, I want the bathroom to be done before everyone visits. Or I want this to be done in time for Thanksgiving, like 2 weeks ahead or a week ahead, and trying to like fit a big project into a small period of time with like people showing up. We did that in our last house and it did not turn out well at all. And you will have someone sitting on a toilet seat that's like moving. I just feel like put yourself in a position to have time.
To succeed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that goes with realistic expectations for sure.
Yeah. Well, we hope this episode was helpful for you guys. I know, this can be a stressful time, but it's not the end of the world. Like we said, it can be stressful, but it's one of the most rewarding things that you can do. Certainly if you do it yourself. And even if you don't, even if you hire out, it's fine because you're going to get the space that you want at the end of the day.
Thank you for that validation.
Yeah. Well, it's not that I encourage everybody to do some level of DIY. I don't encourage everybody to do what I do because it's very stressful. It adds a lot. And you got to be a specific type of sadistic person to want to put yourself through that much punishment. But, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love it. I love what I get to do. And
it doesn't last forever.
It doesn't last forever, yeah. You're going to have a place that you can call your own at the end of the day, and it's going to be the way you want it, and maybe you spend a little more money. You probably did, because every time I do, I spend a little bit more money, but then you get that space, and, you get those memories in there, and you get the home in the way that you want it, and it's super rewarding.
Nothing like it.
We want to thank our founding sponsor, Filter By, for making this episode possible, and encourage you guys to get involved in the show however you choose to. Whether it's leaving us a voicemail at 978-709-1040, hitting us up on social media. You can find us on Instagram at howtohome_guide, or just follow along on the email list. Subscribe to our email list so that you never miss an episode and see all the contractors and designers and cool people that we have on. We have cool guests all the time, and we learn a ton. So I think we share some really valuable information for you guys.
If there's a guest you want to see on the show, share their profile with us or tag them in the comments. Like, we want to know who you want to hear from and who you love and want to learn from.
Who are you inspired by? There's so many great people out there in both the DIY and home improvement space, and we want to talk to them. We want to bring them on the show, and we want to provide the best information that we can to you guys.
Absolutely.
So please share those with us, and we hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next time.
The How To Home podcast is brought to you by FilterBuy.com, your one-stop direct-to-consumer replacement air filter brand, and is produced in collaboration by Amassed Media Group, LLC, and Intelligent Arts and Artists. The show is executive produced by George Ruiz and Aaron Massey.